Remember when fighting games were the big deal during the 1990s? Back then, Call of Duty was just a twinkle in Infinity Ward's eyes, while Grand Theft Auto was a new series garnering mixed reviews. That's pretty hard to imagine these days. Instead, fighting games such as Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and Samurai Showdown ruled the video game roost as gamers lined up in arcades and placed their quarters on the lower part of the game's screen to reserve their turn for some versus action. Fast forward to today, and fighting games aren't quite the big draw that they used to be. The good news is they still have a loyal, albeit smaller following, so the genre still gets some love, especially from Japanese developers. One popular subgenre are anime-style fighters, so I will be looking at 3 such titles that recently came to US shores. Kicking off the list is Saint Seiya Brave Soldiers for the PlayStation 3. Based on the classic Japanese manga and anime, Saint Seiya doesn't have quite the notoriety of a Dragon Ball or Naruto in the US. If you grew up in Latin America or happen to be a hardcore anime fan, however, it can be the equivalent of pop culture comfort food. Developed by Dimps, the same Osaka-based company responsible for the Dragon Ball games, Saint Seiya does a great job in replicating the look of the Saint Seiya anime in gaming form. For starters, the single-player mode lets you experience several story arcs. Folks who want a better challenge than the AI can also test their mettle online, which offers various modes. For gameplay, you'll rely on basic chains as well as flashy Cosmo moves such as light speed, big bang attacks, and a powered-up state when near death. One downside is that the game can be too simple for fighting game purists or folks with no attachment to its characters. Instead, Brave Soldiers is a game that would get most of its mileage from Saint Seiya fans or those who prefer more accessible fighters. Game number 2 in this week's anime-style fighter special is Aquapazza. I think that's how we call it. Normally, I'm not really that into the hyper-cute genre of Japanese pop culture known as moe. In fact, I even find some of its aspects, specifically the adoration of beautified young girls, a bit disturbing, which is more concrete proof that I am turning into an old fart. So color me surprised when I found myself enjoying Aquapazza Aquaplus Dream Match. Based on a collection of popular characters from various Japanese visual novels, Aquapazza makes no qualms about setting its sights on hardcore otaku, and a pretty specific kind of otaku at that. Somewhere along the way though, Aquapazza managed to create a surprisingly solid old school style fighter that got me playing on despite having no emotional investment in its all-star cast. A lot of it has to do with its use of one of my favorite genres, the 2D fighter. Using an approach that borrows elements from such games as King of Fighters, Guilty Gear, and even Capcom's Versus line, Aquapazza made me remember a lot of the fun times I had playing classic fighters. That means crazy combos and supers, as well as an overpowered boss at the end. Think SNK's frustrating high damage bosses with a sprinkling of cheap HP recovery a la Gil. In fact, one complaint I have is that the game seems to scale up boss damage to make up for AI deficiencies that can be exploited by observant gamers. So instead of a sophisticated AI, the main challenge from the final boss fight involves cheap, high priority, and damaging combos that can get you killed from full health even if you make just a couple of mistakes. Instead, the fun comes from playing a living, breathing human, either locally or online. As with most fighters, the story isn't super deep, but it's charming in its own wacky way for anime fans. Overall, I think it's a pretty solid fighter. Lastly, we've got, take a deep breath, Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 3 Full Burst. If this game sounds kind of familiar, well, you're not going crazy. This is basically an enhanced re-release of, take another deep breath, Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 3, which I also reviewed last year. Fortunately, the game adds several new features besides an even longer title that may cause folks to pass out from oxygen deprivation while saying it in one go. This includes all the downloadable content released since the original game, including 38 costumes. It also adds Sage Mode for Orochimaru fanboy Kabuto as a playable character, an extra chapter featuring the popular Itachi Uchiha, and fine-tuned cinematics, and 100 new missions. Although they don't have the balance and the technical depth of series such as Street Fighter and Virtua Fighter, I've usually enjoyed the Naruto fighting games. They're easy to pick up, have a nice feel while still requiring a bit of strategy. I can say the same about Ninja Storm 3 Full Burst, which uses a style of 3D combat that provides a nice break from the 2D fighters, and even 2.5D titles such as Tekken that people normally play. Presentation is especially nice for this game, although the implementation of stuff outside the fighting, such as traveling around for adventure mode, as well as its liberal use of QTEs, can be cumbersome. The online fanbase can also be a tad emotional, as this is the only game where I've had players mail me with their utter disdain. Interestingly enough, most of the hate mail I get gets from people who use Sasuke. Sasuke! I wonder why. The price tag also can be a tad high for folks who already bought the original game. That said, this is the best version of the game, so if you've never played it before, I recommend getting this one if you like anime-style fighters.
それをなす内派の禁術それがイザナミだ